The alien abduction phenomenon is explored in depth in the new documentary film, The Hidden Hand, Alien Contact and the Government Cover-Up. Producer and director of that movie, James Carman, joins us tonight. And, the focus, of course, is on alien abductions and also the government's involvement with extraterrestrials. And you've certainly got a who's who of ufology in this film with Jim Marrs and Dr. Roger Leir, Linda Moulton Howe, Stanton Friedman, and others. But for you personally, what led you down this road to make this movie?
Well, I lived in Europe for a long time, and I came back to the U.S., and I was producing some DVDs for a healer, and there would be women that were crying, and I could tell that they were upset, and they were talking about hybrid babies that they'd had, and their, being pregnant, and their pregnancies being taken away from them, like just without their permission or without them knowing about it. And then I started meeting people that said that they had been trained to be psychics by the government. And so then I said, well, I have access here. Why don't I do something? And so that's how it started.
I think the film accomplishes some very good things. For example, making a distinction between a positive alien abduction scenario, because evidently they do exist, and a negative, very, very negative alien abduction scenario. And it also serves as an introduction to ufology in general. I mean, you go back to the Roswell crash and examine that for a bit. And this is good for people who aren't necessarily students of UFOs, but for someone who's just coming into this with absolutely no background whatsoever. You provide them with a basis.
Absolutely, because I wanted it to work, kind of lead people by the hand and take them to the phenomenon. And it's also something like where you have to establish that it exists and it's something that isn't to be ridiculed and that it's taken seriously by many people. And there's actually a lot of evidence to support that there is something significant going on. And, who could be more credible than have a Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was the sixth astronaut on the moon, who grew up in Roswell, and then the old-timers came to him and said, look, this is what happened. And then he went to the Pentagon and he got that verified. So, it's just, or if you have like Paul Hellyer, who was the defense minister for Canada, he comes out and says, hey, this is real. These are people, these aren't freaks. They're very solid individuals, and, they have a lot of gravitas, I would say.
A good portion of the film is dedicated, obviously, to alien abductions with some harrowing hypnosis session footage. And in a way, I think it's something that people are very familiar with at this point. I think alien abductions are now part of pop culture in a way. And I guess that all starts with Betty and Barney Hill, doesn't it?
Actually, there was cases in Brazil in the 50s that happened before that, but we didn't hear about it over here in the States. So, yeah, for here in the States, it was, I'd say, the Betty and Barney Hill. But, I mean, again, that's for modern ufology. The abduction is something that's been going on as long as humans have been around.
I was up the school field roughing around love.
So there you have it, a positive experience, according to Mark Brinkerhoff. Of course, people have recorded very negative experiences, meeting their own hybrid children. In other words, the ETs have performed some kind of sexual experimentation on them, resulting in offspring, and the contactee eventually meets their own progeny, which is half human, half alien. If these stories are true, and I'm not saying that they are true or that they're not true, but if they are true, what would be the ultimate aim of these ETs? Why would they be doing this? What purpose would this serve?
I have some ideas. One, I think there's a couple different scenarios. I think one, it could be like some of these ETs, they might not be like, they might be cloned, they might be more biological machines than real kind of entities with a soul. And so they might be looking for other creatures that have a soul, or vessels, even if you want to say, call our bodies, that can contain a soul. And so they would like to kind of cheat their destiny and create a vehicle that can accept a soul. And there's also I didn't go into it in my film too much, but there's a lot of in the literature where they talk about some ETs wanting the human soul or wanting the energy of the human soul. So there's interested not only in our genetics, but they're interested in that soul connection and the power of the soul. That's one scenario. One is obviously, let's say it's humans 40,000 years in the future. There's some kind of huge catastrophe, and they're forced to go underground and live for generation after generation. Everything is very toxic. They've cloned themselves, thousands of times, and the whole gene pool has shrunk so much that they can tell they're ill and they're not going to survive. So they can go back in time, and then they'll take genetics to widen their pool, and so at least their hybrids would be able to survive. That could be one scenario. And then, another scenario could be also just that they want to, if you reach a certain amount of knowledge and wisdom, kind of like scientists, you can imagine us doing this. If we're hearing all the time about there are planets that are like Earth. We hear that all the time. There's
Right.
not even thousands of them. There's more than that. And so let's say we're heading out into space. If we came across a planet like that, why wouldn't we want giraffe to be there if there weren't there already, or if there wasn't a huge ecosystem? It's not like we would say, okay, well, let's honor this ecosystem and let it, humans aren't like that. I mean, we're the first ones to start grafting and hybridizing and doing genetic engineering, just like ET. It's not
Right.
like they're doing something, strange, because that's all we do. So it could be like a way for them to seed different planets, and it could also be a way to seed the Earth. Let's say if we don't make it. I mean, things are pretty critical here on Earth, and if something were to happen, then it could be reseeded, and maybe they think that would be a being that could actually survive.
Well, that's true. When scientists perform experiments on lab rats, they don't sit down beforehand with the rat and try to have a conversation. And, gee, I hope this doesn't hurt, and I'm not destroying your plans for the afternoon by doing this. I guess the hope would be that any advanced species out there in the universe would be a little more compassionate than we are here on Earth. And I guess that's what leads to so many negative abduction stories.
Whether it's usually if it's negative or positive or viewed as negative or positive, these abductions or these contacts, they start early in life, and it kind of and it's something that occurs throughout life, and it's usually generational. Like, so if you've had contact, then probably one of your parents have, probably your grandparents have, and so a lot of a positive scenario would be like you would be taken aboard a craft, and you would be shown, like taking a trip around the Earth or to the moon or around the solar system, brought back, and it would be something like they would give you the feeling that they are there for you, and that they are there to support you, and also there for your spiritual growth, and that whenever you needed help, they could give you support, if not in corporal embodiment, at least through a telepathic communication that's always there.
Almost like a guardian angel.
Yes, but they actually show up sometimes. A lot of times they show up in craft.
I think what makes it difficult for the average person to comprehend alien abductions is because when you hear the story, it's always the bright light in the room, and then the person is asleep and they're lifted out of bed and they go right through the ceiling and up into the craft. If these abductions were happening all the time, there'd be a mass epidemic of husbands pulling into the driveway and reporting seeing their wife flying out of the window, and we don't get that.
We usually, like, if you're abducted in your house, most of the time the people around you would have no idea about it, and often they would be taken too. And the person who remembers it is just a little bit more awake, a little bit more conscious than everyone else. And so oftentimes people are taken with their whole family and their children and their husbands. Not all the time. Sometimes the husband will just stay at home, and then you'll be taken and you'll be brought back, and they'll just be snoring still. I knew a girl, she said, there was a time when her mother would be gone all the time during the middle of the day, and she would go also into her parents' room at night, and her father would be there, the mother wouldn't be there. And, Yeah, but it's not only like that. It's sometimes there have been cases where there have been 4 or 5 witnesses that have seen something like this. There was a famous one in the UN, and then there was a famous one in Arizona where Travis Walton was taken, and there were 4 of his co-workers who are lumberjacks or foresters. They actually saw him being taken. And so it's not uncommon that people don't view it. But I think it has to do kind of with their perception and their mindset, because I think most people, they're given an overlay and they just don't recognize it.
And I wonder if it's also a case where the abductee could be taken, go into the craft, and yet their bodies still remain behind. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it makes total sense, because one, we have more than one body. We've got, emotional, mental, spiritual bodies. And if you're dealing with a different dimension that isn't as dense as this one, you wouldn't necessarily need to take the physical body. You could take maybe all the other bodies and then put them back in. It's a kind of the same idea where people leave their body. When they're in a meditative state, or if they had an accident, you'll see that they leave their body and they're watching themselves from above.
I'll tell you this. Years ago, a friend of mine gave me a cassette of what alleged to be government officials blowing the whistle on the whole thing, and their voices were disguised, and this could have been a prank, a very elaborate prank, for all we know, but it sounded legit, certainly. And basically, the gist of what they were saying was, the government knows this is going on, can do nothing to stop it, because they're nowhere near as advanced as the extraterrestrials, and they have no desire to stop it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's something else going on there. I think perhaps they can't prevent it, but I think they know who is being taken, and I think they are actually taking the people who are taken so they can debrief them, so they can find more about what ET is up to in terms of technology, in terms of agenda, in terms of what genetics they're interested in. So instead of, protecting your own citizens, and if you knew that these people were being abducted, you could give them some kind of solace, you could give them some kind of therapy, but no, you just re-abduct them, shoot them full of drugs, and hypnotize them with other cover memories, so you can get that information. So, I think that's as abhorrent as what ET is doing in that case, and it's definitely immoral, and it's not democratic, and it doesn't belong in our republic.
I have to ask you about some of the UFO footage you show in the documentary, because much of it I've never seen before. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube, but the clarity in some of this footage is just staggering. Was this footage donated to you? Did you just find it scouring the internet? Where did this come from?
Well, I kind of got everything licensed and got my Q's and O's. No, it was, some of it was I got from Jaime Maussan in Mexico. Some of it was I got from Michael Hesseman in Europe, and some of it I got from Antonio Ursi from Italy. And so kind of those are the people I had contact with, and so that's what I took. I haven't really seen that much in YouTube. I've seen some things. I'm interested in the NASA UFO footage, which is quite incredible, some of it. But I kind of took what I had access to and that I thought was something really palpable, instead of just some little blip in the sky, so that you see, wow, this is really something.
Right. We're getting a little interference on your phone, which might be ET related at this point. Okay. I don't know what exactly that is. It's getting a little mechanical sounding there. A place where people can find out more about the film.
Okay, they can go to my website, which is hiddenhandthemovie.com. That's hiddenhandthemovie.com. And there I've got, where you can look at it, some more information, some reviews. I've won 5 awards, and I've also, where I'm speaking to the media. So that's all on the website, and I'm very interested in talking to people. If you want to connect to me at Facebook, it's hiddenhandthemovie.com, or Twitter is James Carman, capital T, capital T, capital P. It'll come out in DVD in January, but right now you can get it on iTunes, Vimeo, you can get it on Xbox, Google Play, Amazon Instant, so a lot of different formats.
Now, I have to ask you this final question, because whenever there is a documentary film that comes out that exposes government secrets, naturally, a small portion of the audience is probably wondering if you've been contacted by any government agency regarding any of the information that you've presented in the film.
No. There was a time when I was in England, I was invited to go look where they have ETs flying around in a certain place, and it was a very odd invitation. Obviously, it was an official government invitation, but yeah, I declined that. I just didn't want to go.
Because maybe you wouldn't have come back.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, James, for chatting with us about this topic, and also an excellent film. And I should tell the audience, I'm not the sort of person to get queasy or a little nervous watching something. But this film made me genuinely nervous. Here I was late at night watching it, and I'm thinking, what am I doing to myself here? Where every sound outside the house, it could be a dog barking across the street, and I think they're coming for me. So even if you don't believe anything of what we were talking about this evening, I think you'd still enjoy the film. The documentary is called The Hidden Hand. James, thanks so much for being on the show.